One thing that's become abundantly clear in the comments of the last few videos is that very few people understand inflation, what it is, what causes it, and whether it's good or bad. So here, I'll once again go back to the basics and cover the issue from the ground up. So, what is inflation? What happens when prices go up? Is that inflation? What if prices go down? Is that deflation? In order to begin to understand this, the first thing we need to understand is what a price actually is. If widgets cost $20, what does that mean? It means the value of a widget is 20 times that of a dollar. So a price is, in fact, a ratio of the value of the good or service to the value of the currency. So if widgets are $20, that means that the ratio of the value of a widget to the value of the dollar is 20 to 1. So what happens if the price of a widget changes? Suppose it goes up to $25. What does that mean? Has the value of the widget gone up? Are widgets suddenly more valuable? It could be. But remember that the price is a ratio. It may not be the value of the widget that's gone up. It may be the value of the dollar that's gone down. Economists therefore talk of two separate values for goods and services. The nominal value is the price of the good. The real value is the actual value of the good. Now, there is a difficulty in measuring real value since it has to be expressed in terms, such as dollars, that may itself vary. How economists do this is beyond the scope of this video. For now, just understand that the good is considered to have a real value intrinsically. So if the price of the widget goes up, we need to look at what happens to its real value. If its real value goes up, then the new price is simply a reflection of this. Maybe a resource used to make the widget is suddenly more scarce, or a new use for widgets is found which increases their value. Conversely, if both the nominal value and the real value go down, then the price is a reflection of real value. So if new technology means you can make widgets with fewer resources and less labor, the real value goes down and the price drops as a result. What if this happens economy-wide? Many politicians and political economists try to express inflation as the change in prices across the board. But is it? Let's consider the following scenario. In the last 30 years, computers have increased efficiency across the board. In every industry and at every level, computers have made it possible to do the same job with much fewer resources. If we hold every other economic effect constant, which didn't happen, but bear with me, this is a hypothetical scenario, then prices across the board will go down. Some would say that's deflation, but it just isn't. The reason why is that the efficiency resulting from the new technology has caused real values across the board to decrease, and the lower price is merely reflecting this. That's a different scenario from the deflation the U.S. experienced in the Great Depression. In the Great Depression, prices dropped without a corresponding drop in real value. What happened? Remember that prices are a ratio between the value of a good or service and the value of a dollar. So if the values of the goods and services in the economy didn't drop, but the price did, then the value of the dollar must have increased. Why? Because in 1929, the Federal Reserve, afraid of inflation, hit the brakes on the money supply, causing the stock market to crash that October. Less money in the economy makes the dollar more valuable, and when the dollar is more valuable, people tend to hold on to their cash rather than spend it. The economy takes a hit, and banks get into trouble as people run to get their valuable dollars. In order to prevent banking failures during a run, the Fed is supposed to step in as lender of last resort. That's why it was created in the first place. But they didn't. The banks started failing. Now, the U.S. was still under the gold standard at the time. The gold standard should have come in to save the economy, and it tried. Under the rules of the gold standard, in such a situation, gold will come in from other countries. And it did, primarily from the UK. The Fed was supposed to use this gold to create new money, which would have gotten us out of the Great Depression, but it didn't. It just locked the gold away in a vault, and it was as if the gold didn't even exist. The deflationary economy continued until the government needed to fund their activities in World War II. The Fed finally released their stranglehold on the money supply, and the economy finally recovered. The difference is, in the computerized economy, prices fell, but since this was a reflection of the change in real value, then the result is that capital was freed up. and could be used for other purposes. This means that people could afford more and will save more, and investors will invest more. This grows the economy, creating jobs and increasing wealth for everybody. But in the Great Depression, prices fell not because of a change in real value, but a change in the value of the dollar. That's why it was deflation. In this case, the economy was stifled, not grown. So going back to our widget, if the price of the widget rises to $25 but the real value is constant, then that means the rise in price is due to inflation. Conversely, if the price drops with no change in the real value, then this is due to deflation. And since the inflation or deflation would be due to the changing value of the dollar, prices will have this tendency economy-wide. Now, some economists claim that inflation is necessary when prices fall in order to maintain price stability. What effect does this have? Let's go back to our hypothetical economy that's been improved by computers. Remember that here, prices fell in response to a decrease in real value, and this frees up capital for other purposes. What happens if the government inflates the money supply in response? The government sells bonds to the central bank, which buys them with money created out of thin air. A greater quantity of money, according to the law of supply and demand, means that the value of the dollar drops. So if you have $10,000, then after this takes effect, you still have $10,000 nominally. But in real terms, this is a loss of wealth since the $10,000 doesn't go as far as it did. Maybe it only buys what used to only cost $9,000. Without the inflation, you would have had an extra $1,000 to spend, save, donate to a cause, or whatever. That amount of value has been taken from you and used by the government, exactly as if you'd been taxed that extra $1,000. This is why many economists refer to the inflation tax. It's a tax because it's a transfer of wealth from the people to the government. Moreover, it's a regressive tax, since it's the poor, the middle class, and the small businesses that take the inflationary hit, while the government, the banking system, and politically connected corporations benefit. Since they get to use the new money first, they get the full value of the money before inflation takes effect. Workers and salaried employees take the biggest hit. Since wages and salaries are stickier than prices, which means they don't change as quickly, they're constantly playing catch-up with inflation, and by the time they have caught up, further inflation has occurred, and so people struggle just to keep up. And while they're playing catch-up, they find that their earnings move them up into a higher tax bracket. So although they're actually making less money in real terms, since they're making more nominally, they pay a greater percentage in taxes. It's exactly as if the government started charging lower wage earners a higher tax rate without Congress even voting on it. Taxation without representation. But it's even more perverse than that. That $1,000 of wealth you lost, let's say you really need it for something, which, because of that very same inflation, now costs over $1,100. So you take out a loan. The reason you can borrow this money is because of the money the Fed created out of thin air, but it's also true that if they hadn't done that, you wouldn't have had to borrow that extra money at all. So now you're in debt over $1,100, which will have to be paid back with interest when by all rights, every bit of that should have been yours to begin with, debt-free. From all of this, it's easy to see that, in order to have a robust economy, as well as the greatest benefit for the poor, the government should not be striving for price stability, but monetary stability. Inflation is a tax, a regressive tax that increases the gap between the rich and the poor and hurts wage earners while benefiting banks and big corporations. And the idea that an economy needs inflation to grow or to maintain stability or whatever is yet another myth perpetuated on the people by the ones who have been elected to represent them.